I'm so interested in the development of brains in infants because I think it can tell us quite a lot. Like I've heard, I don't know anything about it, but I meant to look into it. Some discussion about like the dominance of the right hemisphere in children, and then the left hemisphere sort of comes to predominate like later in life or something like that. So that's why children are much more like feely, and language isn't really a thing yet, and then it sort of becomes so. I don't know. Like it's one thing that is for sure is that it is extremely complicated.
Yeah, weird.
I also think, by the way, that might have something to do with the free will thing, the hemisphere stuff. I talk about hemispheres all the time as well, because I think it's so interesting the way that they like independently interact. And I think that like maybe our feeling of free will comes from our like retrospective rationalization of stuff that we just did.
That is, I mean, I've heard that as an explanation for like why it feels like free will is because we are always telling a story to ourselves.
Exactly.
And like what story makes sense.
Yeah.
And I can't cite this with any level of accuracy, but people who only have one hemisphere of the brain, like you, or
corpus callosotomy,
or have the
split. They split the brain in two.
You can show them a thing and then they can act based on what they're seeing, but they don't know that they're seeing it. And so they tell you a story about why they're acting that is different from the actual reason.
Exactly. I talk about this all the time. I sometimes talk about Alex O'Connor bingo. And if you're at home, it's like, consciousness, China brain, Mary's room, split brain, Gnostic Gospels, which we've managed not to do. Although I did do that with Rhett the other day. Somehow it just happened. But yes, the split brain stuff is fascinating. Like you can watch on YouTube the experiments where they'll send just the right or the left visual field information. So the left brain does speech, and it also governs the right sort of visual field. And the right brain doesn't do speech, and it's left visual field. So if you show the left visual field, so right hand side of the eye, book, the person goes book, and you show the word camera, they go camera. And if you show them to the other side, cowboy, they'll say, I didn't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about. And then you give their left hand a pencil. They just close your eyes and just let your hand, they'll draw a cowboy, which is crazy. But so the weird thing that I think you're talking about, and there's been like really specific proofs of this in split brain patients. This is just in people, by the way, who have the split. The corpus callosotomy is split. Like in functioning brains, they just communicate with each other, of course. Yeah. You can't just do this at home. I should have clarified that. But with these split brain patients who've had that procedure, if you show them an instruction to just the right-hand side of the brain, and they're in an experiment, so they're awaiting instructions, and the instruction says, get up and walk over to that table. They'll get up, they'll walk over there. Then when the experimenter says, why did you just do that? It's not even that they say, oh, I don't know.
They're like, I wanted a glass of water.
Exactly. And they believe it.
Yeah.
They think it's true. And so I'm thinking, like when you were talking about free will earlier.
I just wanted to stop there, but basically I'm going to be doing just kind of a live reaction to Alex O'Connor's thoughts on free will. I've heard some of them before, but I, of course, believe in free will, not just because I am a Christian, but also because I do think that there is good evidence for it. And I think that in order to answer some of the questions of of the evidence we see for consciousness, we need to have free will, free choice, at least in the sense that in what you are physically capable of and even metaphysically capable of. Because I do agree that there are physical and metaphysical limitations. True, like, depends on how you define free will, but I would essentially define it as that, essentially unlimited choice within your physical and metaphysical capabilities, which does technically limit, it does limit the choices, but that isn't something that you chose. So just in terms of the understanding of that word, the etymology. And, split brain patients are so intriguing to me. And let me just again, I'm not a philosopher here. I've said this many times. If you guys don't know me, my name's Samuel Spoonhour. I evangelize constantly. And I absolutely love philosophy and especially enjoy talking about the Bible and just kind of giving a Christian's perspective on things that like other philosophies and just like, why I disagree with them. I think it's just good to have this discussion. It's healthy. I think that I've always thought about this about Alex O'Connor, just real quick, is that I think oftentimes very similar to him, or in the same way. Not always, but he'll like, of course, have like a thought experiment. I'm just like, bro, I would have thought literally that exact same thing. I'm certain that other people can feel that way just because, we are humans living in a specific time and age, and we all get relatively similar information. Same books out today are going to be out tomorrow, if not a few more or just a few less. So basically, we all kind of have a lot of like general information. And, there are like different tiers and all that in our society. And I'm certain he knows more than I do, at least when it comes to philosophy. I don't know if he actually does videography, cinematography, and builds computers and like knows how to set up a NAS and all that, or build speakers. But, that just some of the expertise that I have. He has really good expertise in theology and philosophy. He's a very smart guy. So just want to like let you all know that I'm not here to just like put Alex O'Connor in the dirt because I think he's a really cool guy. If in the future sometime I get bigger and then he wants to sit down, have a conversation with me, that would be so cool. Because I think he's a cool human being. I'd love to see him in heaven someday. Don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see. But basically, in from my perspective and my just current understanding of split brain patients, and even what I learned from psychology, is that brains will have sincerely malfunctions and or mutations or even just what you essentially call a disorder that inhibit essentially what I see as, or what a lot of even Christian, I guess, scientists or philosophers would say is the connection between the brain and the mind. I would say that, your mind is essentially on a different level than your brain, but both are interconnected. To what degree, I couldn't fully say. But that mind, or rather even your soul, which is maybe it's the exact same thing. Maybe your mind and soul are the same thing. It's like I can't completely explain it, but I can tell you that it in fact is there, right? It's just like some axioms of like certain axioms in geometry, right? It's like that these proofs are true. You can't technically prove them. Like some of them to certain degrees you can, but it's assumed, right? These things are assumed. It's also like laws in science, right? We know that there is a strong and a weak nuclear forces, and that is because we observe it, right? It's like we have evidence for this to essentially exist. And so I would say it's the exact same with free will and even a mind and consciousness. Is like I cannot fully explain to you these things that are metaphysical and beyond me, but yet I know that these have been given to me. And for instance, like, I know he's going to get to hunger, but so I'll talk about that in a bit. I did see a little bit of this video just to check that he was actually going to give his thoughts, because I know he's talking to, I think, Hank Green. And so like split brain patients is so intriguing, but say if we like for the sake of this argument, we have evidence for people choosing things like in other areas and consciousness, then essentially to basically explain a split brain patient, well, it's just that their brain is basically malfunctioning. That would be totally okay explanation. There are no issues with that. It's obvious, is clearly not working correctly of the norm that we see and understand of human beings. I don't know if it's necessarily a mutation. I do wonder how many split brain patients there are, or split brain people. just kind of on average. I'm just like curious. I know that in our own bodies, we actually have many mutations. Of course, not all of them actually turn to cancer or are, I believe the word is carcinogenic, right? If you have a mole, you have cancer. It just hasn't metastasized. Am I using those words correctly? And something evil that wants to literally kill your innards. So it's just it's calm, it's tamed, it's tepid, and so it's easy to say, well, like say if my arm gets cut off, right? Does that mean that I have a lower amount of free will? Like say if I have free will, again, according to at least the definition that I gave, is that, well, no, you don't have a lower amount of free will. It's just that your physical capabilities are actually reduced. So it would be the same if your brain is not working correctly. Well, if consciousness is real, then that ultimately means that you have the brain interacting with consciousness. So if someone makes a mistake, like in their supposed metaphysical mind or soul, and they don't make a correct choice, or they're rather even like influenced, I would not put it past the fact that it's merely a malfunction, right? This is the question that I always like to ask, though, is like, are those doctors choosing to do these tests, existential tests, right? They oftentimes, this is the thing about philosophers and psychologists, is they will existentially think about these things. I would say that that's evidence for consciousness, because you're aware of your existence, right? That's basically consciousness, right? Animals don't have that, right? If animals start making judicial systems and start delegating in order to essentially win someone over to their side, instead of just falling prey to like natural, hormones, for instance. There is no hormone for wanting to delegate with somebody. Okay. Even though we know that it's productive and you can get dopamine, there is no like direct correlation, or even certainly a causation. There is no causation for those kinds of things, rather than just, we have studied these things and observed these things that is actually good for our society. This is how we can even have these philosophical conversations. Excuse me. But basically, that's kind of where I am at with like split brain patients, is like, maybe they are genuinely physically inhibited, right? But that's a physical limitation. So how could you say that then disproves free will? I would say that it's intriguing. And I know Alex O'Connor feels the same way. And I don't think Alex O'Connor is saying that it disproves free will, but it is very interesting. And it's certainly something to look into. I'm just giving my thoughts. Tell me what you guys think. Let's watch a bit more of this.
I was thinking about the hemispheres, as we always do. I was like, okay, so if the right brain just does stuff, and then the left brain retrospectively says, oh no, I remember that the reason why I did that before was because of this, this, and this. That's why we get this weird feeling. I feel like I chose to do that, because that was me, when actually, no, you didn't.
I feel like if I actually believed that I didn't have free will, I would act differently, which...
Well, like people say this quite often, and often like as a means of objection. They say to me,
exactly.
You don't act like there's no free will. And I'm like, what would that look like?
Yeah.
Like why would you act differently?
I don't know.
Because people say
I do still care about all the same things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the argument against free will is that you are just governed by the desires that you don't control.
Yeah.
So when you eat, it's because you're hungry and you don't control being hungry and whatnot. And so somebody says, well, what if you just knew there was free will? It's like, I'm still hungry.
Yeah.
I'm still going to go and eat. I'm just going to know that that's like why I'm doing it. It's exactly the same thing as something like hunger. Like you feel hunger, and I could say, oh, but Hank, don't you know that the reason you feel hunger is because of this evolutionary explanation for blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you'll go like, oh, that's really interesting, but I'm still hungry. It doesn't like remove the hunger just to explain why it's happening.
Yeah, and he's completely right. It doesn't, the explanation doesn't do that. But I will say this, and this is something that we all kind of fall prey to, is when we start thinking existentially and first of all, defining terms. That's why etymology is important. But when we start going on to the level of ontology, is that we kind of, I believe it's epistemology is kind of in between, which is like how we know things. But maybe I need to do more research into basics of philosophy. Okay. But like you feel hunger, right? You don't choose to feel hunger. I agree that your brain and your hormones and your body even will do things outside of your control. But if my definition of free will is true, well, then it's still included in that, is that your body might do things that like you ultimately don't necessarily even know why, right? For instance, you might have cancer that just starts coming up in kind of its own way, and it ultimately kills you, right? Or you might get like for instance, rheumatoid arthritis, where your body starts attacking itself. There are things that even your body will do of its own. But this is the thing, right? This is the point. Like that only works. Like that thought process only works if there is an I, if there is a your, if you are actually something. If you think, if you know, this is kind of a Descartes argument. It's like, I think, therefore I am. Like, I know that I exist. I know that I'm conscious because I'm able to think. And no, sometimes your brain doesn't work correctly. And sometimes you are even convinced of the things that your brain perceives, right? And so that's why it's important to be oftentimes like skeptical to a degree. Of course, skepticism, I disagree with it fundamentally, but I like some ideas of it. Done a video on that, actually. You could check that out. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, but you choose when to eat, and you can fight that hunger. Like, that's the intriguing part. Like, animals don't do that. They just fight for, like they just fight for food, unless they're trained otherwise. I understand you can train, right? But this is the thing, is you can train yourself. You can train your own body. Animals can't do that. You could train animals just like a computer, or just like essentially an LLM, right? Is you can add in essentially, they're not nodes, but you can essentially add more, and then you can also give it data and be like, this is a, this piece is yes, this piece is yes, this piece is a no, or like, this is a 1, this is a 0, this is 1, this is 0. And you can even do that with yourself. You can actually train yourself, which I would say, oh, well, that's evidence for consciousness and free will. You are choosing to do that. And people will fall prey to their emotions and to their feelings because it's easy. It's not difficult. It's very simple. It's just given to you. You don't have to try hard. We use that type of language to explain something really complex going on. And I understand Alex O'Connor, he would admit this. I don't fully understand these things, nor am I saying that I do. Totally. That's 100% fair. And he might not even say, 100% free will does not exist. I don't think he would say that. And I'm not saying that he is, of course, the most intelligent philosopher out there, right? That I would even be critiquing. I think he's smart. I think he's cool. That's why I kind of going after this, because I know he talks about it a bit. Even like the split brain patients, which I think is so intriguing. But basically, in my worldview, it totally works. It still works completely fine. I don't really see any issues. I didn't just make that definition because of, I'm trying to like compromise. It's more like off of what I see, the evidence that I have seen and what I know and understand, that argument works the best. Because I'm trying to follow the evidence where it leads. I'm trying to understand the world around me in truth. And of course, now I'm biased towards Christianity. But it's intriguing as well because, right, Calvinists would disagree, or at least certain Calvinists, or even just, Reformed Baptists, to a certain degree, would disagree with, maybe not just Baptists, would say that there is no free will in people who aren't regenerated. And so, maybe Alex O'Connor would grant that to say, like, if God does exist, can he essentially give you free will and free choice? If now currently you don't, right? I'm certain he would say, well, of course, right? That's logically possible. But, and that's not to say like, oh, well, that helps to explain evil and that's why you hold to free will. No, I actually hold to free will because it's assumed. One of the biggest reasons for me is actually because it's assumed in Scripture. So one of the biggest reasons is actually a theological one, is that it is assumed from the very beginning. Even just Jesus actually like commanding the idea of believing on him, that comes from the fact that you actually get to choose. Even it's funny because Romans 9 is like used for Calvinism, and like, God just like, he puts destruction on some people and salvation on others, which it's totally misreading Romans 9. But then at the end, it's just like, it actually, like Paul talks about choice. I think you actually have to like turn to that passage, but he quotes an Old Testament passage like how, to those who do not believe, Jesus Christ, or the rock, the cornerstone, is a stumbling block. To those who do not believe. And he correlates that with people being devoted to destruction. It's more like God knows, because he knows the future. He knows the choices you're going to make, and he just plans accordingly, which in my worldview works perfectly. That's kind of like Molinism, is that God is sovereign, and yet we still have free choice and free will. But a lot of times it comes down to the etymology of that word, and even just the nuances and complexities around it. Again, I'm certain Alex O'Connor and even other Christians, or even if you're listening right now, you're like, yes, I understand these things are complex. This is difficult to understand, but this is why we have these conversations, to understand the world around us. So I want to just watch a little bit more of this, because I know he said something on like, oh yeah, people like say to him like, you act like. Now I would say I don't know if you necessarily act like you have free will. Well, I mean, technically, I would say you act like you are conscious. What would be like to not act like that? Well, for instance, when your body feels a way, you just do that thing. Like, I would say in with lack of no training, with a lack of training, then instantaneously following those feelings. Or can you completely ignore those emotions and those feelings completely? This is how depression happens. And suicide is because people will ignore their emotions, or in some instances, they'll actually give in to their bitterness and to their emotions. Is like depression, for denial, for instance, right? You can see this happen, but it doesn't mean it's not happening in real time, right? Just like the fact that, I think it's capable for God to see what we're going to do in the future, but that doesn't mean he's actually controlling us to do those things. He just knows what we're going to choose freely within, of course, the physical and metaphysical limits that we have. I don't know. What do you guys think? I thought it was intriguing. I didn't really have too much else to go over in that, because I think maybe next time I'll go over free will a little bit more. I think Alex O'Connor, again, is a very intelligent person, and I totally respect the guy. I just definitely, of course, disagree, as you can see, on some things. Still find fascinating a lot of the same things that he does. But at the end of the day, I would say something. again, I know there's more nuances and complexities, but like he is choosing to have that conversation, right? He is saying those things. Yeah. And then like, of course, the objection is like, well, no, I've just been basically trained like a computer to think this way and to think these things. But man, if you get married, if you go to college, like marriage, you got to take a step of faith into it. And there's like this hesitancy because you don't know it'll work out, and you have to actually make that decision to like jump into it. And if you say it's just for the sex reason, it's not always just for that. Why people jump into that, because of course the woman has to do the same thing, and she desires companionship. Yeah, but why be hesitant then? Why is there hesitancy? That's what I'm curious about. But anyways, I'm going to ramble on, but basically I just wanted to end there. Tell me what you guys think. Leave a comment below. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. This was great. Hope you all have an amazing day, and hope to see you on the next one.